Hi everybody, I'm Elise. There's another truth on YouTube. I've been trying to do this video a few times now since yesterday or late yesterday evening. It's about my opinions of why I don't celebrate July 4th. I know I might lose some of you on this, and that's okay. I believe in the right to self-determination, bodily autonomy, choice-making decisions, choice-making processes, and ongoing consent. They're critical to relating to any human being on this planet, in my opinion. Now, my not celebrating the 4th of July isn't because I don't want anybody else to celebrate it. Of course I do. I want people to be safe and happy, protected. I don't want anything to happen to them while they're celebrating, because sometimes drinking, fireworks, and boating all together can be an issue. Those things are to be enjoyed, but safely. Celebrating the July 4th is just not something I do. I find it a very somber occasion. And that is my right as an American to celebrate that the way that I want to, or to observe that the way that I want to. And that is okay as well. There is a lot going on, and it gives me no reason to celebrate. And on top of that, I haven't celebrated it in decades. There are other reasons for that, which I will not discuss here. Now, recently I got into an exchange, a brief exchange, if you'll call it, on another content creator's comment section. Has nothing to do with the creator herself, because she is a wonderful content creator. She is an absolute gem, in my opinion. She wished all of her American friends and connections and viewers on YouTube, whoever she deems as part of her community, a happy July 4th. I respect that. I merely said in response that while I don't celebrate the July 4th, that I do want everybody to have a safe holiday based on some of the things that I talked about just a couple of minutes ago. I received an interesting reply, and there were interesting things said in that thread. One of the replies is to suggest that I am not a true American because I don't celebrate the 4th of July. In other words, of course, I'm paraphrasing, that is how I understood it. Of course, it's absurd because I do not need to celebrate it to be a true American, whatever that means. I mean, I could define it technically, but I don't have the full scope of the American experience for everybody in my head. I only have my own perspectives and what other people have expressed themselves. Independence, bodily autonomy, independent choice making, and ongoing consent are very important values and way of living for me. I want that for everybody. I also want the truth about our country to be told, to have those hard discussions so that we can heal as a nation. That doesn't make me less American. Just because I don't like bombs in the sky, I don't do barbecues, and I don't wave American flags everywhere, does not make me less American. I have a right to that self determination. I have reservations about many things, about how I feel, and what defines independence now as opposed to what defined independence when that Declaration of Independence was signed. Now, there were parts of my life where I had interpreted that in many different ways, and of course, I was in different phases of my own life, figuring that I hate saying the forefathers. I've said it before. I really don't like saying that. But when they signed that, when they put that together painstakingly, I had hoped that there would have been at least a scintilla of foresight into what this could mean, what the future generations, and I think there were a lot of implications of that, of how the future generations would actually change that, fight for their freedoms, and so on. That is how I took it. But of course, some of the people who signed this had enslaved people themselves, had relationships with underage enslaved women, and it's very hard for me to revere any of these people who do things like that. That's where I draw the line. So while I don't celebrate independence traditionally, I do that by exercising my rights and respecting that of others and working to preserve that of others. And yes, I'm in the arena. I work in the field of exactly that. And it takes a lot of self reflection, a lot of putting my own things aside for the betterment of others. And it's about time I do something like that. Doesn't make me less American. In that same discussion, there was another topic that, not another thing that brought up that people felt like they were the odd person celebrating July 4th. That's not true. I think this year's 4th of July, because of everything that's going on, I think there were more people celebrating it than ever. And there is data that I read to show that I'm not exactly sure what the sample was that they took this information, but most people they sampled celebrated July 4th. It was a little more difficult during the pandemic. Now, there are a lot of people who don't feel like celebrating it and they're not happy, and they don't have to be happy about it given the situation. So, independence itself, many people have different viewpoints on what that means. Some people want it for themselves and not others, and other people are fighting so that everybody has that. I think there's a lot of crazy ass propaganda and nonsense going on that's taking our attention away from what's really going on. As a local politician in my community said on one of his social medias that he wished people a happy and safe 4th of July. But the way he described it is something that I signed up for when I voted for him. And that is that we continue to work for equitability, which leads to equality, unity with compassion and love. And I aspire to be that way. That's how I want to be. That's how I want to work. And I do work in that way, but I that's how I want to be personally. Because what I do, I just don't do it for one group of people. Of course, I have my priorities. I know my responsibilities, and I will not uh, I will not be deterred from that mission. That, well, it's not a mission, but that work and what those responsibilities are. But access to good mental health care, access to addiction therapy and rehabilitation in the right way and not in a prison cell, reproductive rights, access to good food, affordable housing, opportunities to learn, grow, and actually discuss things together so that we can make it a better society for everybody. I get to work with all kinds of people with different thinking, and I may not agree with them, and sometimes, I do a face palm every time they open up their mouth. It's like, oh, you screwed that up. You shouldn't have said that. You have to say this. And, all my thinking. When I see prominent people ignoring certain groups of people in their speech to appeal to others, it's about all of us, not just a group of us. But I work with some of the best. And But I also have my own mind, my own decision making processes, my own self determination. And I also work toward the betterment of my community. It doesn't make me better than anybody else. I feel it's part of my civic duty. I owe it to this community. I want to make a difference, and I got tired of bitching and screaming about how unfair and ridiculous things are. Well, I signed up to do something about it, you know? That doesn't make me less American. Doesn't make anybody less American if they have a different opinion about what this means for them in their own lives. Oh, and by the way, the local politicians and immigrants, so his perspective on it is extremely important because many immigrants have a different idea of what the 4th of July is, what independence means. And I respect that and understand that. I lived overseas. It's not the same thing. And while I had the opportunity to live among wonderful, amazing people, my eyes were open to a lot of realities and things. And I'm not going to lie, when I got back to the United States, I wanted to kiss the ground as soon as I got off that airplane. There's no doubt about that. That's how I felt at the time. That I was happy to be back home because this is my home. The United States educated me. I use that education, doing exactly what I'm doing now. Going back to that conversation once again, there was talk about that there seems to be this link between having veterans in one family and a certain type of patriotism or a certain type of obligation to celebrate July 4th. I will tell you something. My grandfather, who is now deceased, was a medaled war hero from the Korean War. This was something he never discussed with us. I actually found out through my grandmother much later in life. One of my grandmothers, because he was married twice. So, this is a man who worshiped Donald Trump even before Trump became president. Had a Donald Trump collector's doll that probably came out, in the 90s? And I said, oh, God. But you know what? I said that in my mind. I didn't say it to him because it's his property and he has a right to do whatever he wants. He had every right to do that. He never once told us that we had to celebrate July 4th, that we had to pledge of allegiance, that we had to do any of these things. Never once did he insist that we do any of that. There was a time I did tell him I don't celebrate July 4th. I feel it's a somber occasion. He understood. Didn't tell me once I was un-American for that. He's a veteran. Or he was a veteran. Because he was non-judgmental. That speaks a lot about his character, considering this man has gone through more horrors in his life than anybody I know. And he was pretty much conscripted to go to war before he even turned 18. He didn't even have the option for any kind of rehabilitation or option for school. Now, he wasn't conventionally intelligent, but he was brilliant in many other ways. He understood poetry. He was very creative. He took opportunities to learn in different ways. His home was beautiful, colorful, artistic. His entire home and property was a sanctuary for animals and wounded animals that my grandmother would pick up from the street and bring home and take care of. And he took care of a lot of wounded people as well. The house was full of birds. The whole place, we had chickens, a pond with fish in it, a pool, tents, barbecues all the time. I spent some July 4ths there. Although they were making firecrackers in the street, and the noise always bothered me. But I was with my family, and sometimes we'd go to the Charles River. When I was young, I'd go to the Charles River, and we would sit on the pier with our picnic blanket and the sandwiches and stuff that my mother made for us. Now, my mother was, I talked about my complicated relationship, my past about that. But these were some of the better times. I just couldn't stand the bombs going off in the sky. It always unnerved me. I would start crying. I had so many issues with it. And I felt July 4th was a sad time in many respects. I think the good thing about, I remember those picnics, and I remember that when John Williams was still doing the pops, he would play Star Wars music. just before it started, and then the patriotic music came on. I remember that. That was like a long time ago. So, yes, I do have some good memories of it, but it's not something I choose to celebrate. That doesn't mean I don't observe or respect independence. I know what that means. I know how important that is. I'll fight tooth and nail for anybody's independence, at least through what I do in my civil work, which does have which is part of the governmental system. Because God knows I try to get my own independence, struggle to get my own independence from all of the trauma and stuff that I've gone through. There's so many different ways people approach independence, and it's important that there's no one way to fight for that or respond to it or observe it. There are many different ways people do that. There are people who share my opinions that went out uh, and saw the fireworks in Boston. No problem. That is their choice. I choose not to, but I'm not against anybody else celebrating and being safe about it. It's just I want everybody to have that independence and have that equitability and equality. Not just me, not just a privileged few, but everybody deserves that. Everybody deserves to have that right to exercise their self-determination. That's all I have to say about that. I may lose some of you in this, but that's okay, because you're exercising your right to self-determination yourself, to decide who you want to listen to or not. Now, comments will be turned off on this video, and I will not discuss my point of view about this any longer. I've said what I've had to say. There's more to it than that, but I just wanted to try to give some explanation of what I think about independence and why is it that I'm not feeling July 4th. That's all. Take care of yourselves. Be true to yourselves. Exercise your rights. And all of my best. And I sincerely mean that.